Hey guys, welcome to the first edition of the Q&A for the online coaching group. This is the July edition, and I'm just going to read over the questions that you guys asked me on the group, and I read these a couple of days ago and I haven't read them since. But as I read them, I'll answer them as well, and it'll give you a pretty clear understanding or indication of my thoughts or my answers, just like I would if you asked me face to face. So the first question is from Daniel, and it says, just a thought, maybe you could give an opinion on how overdoing one macro, as an example protein, or underdoing one, such as carbs, can derail your progress and weigh in on the calorie is just a calorie debate. Okay, so if you I think there's two questions there, and the first question is, how can it affect your progress or your results if you go over in your protein and under in your carbs and things like that? And the main focus, I guess, is protein is going to build and maintain muscle. So with protein, you always want to have it the same or close to the same. So you don't really want to change that macro too much. However, carbs, if you go under your carbs and go over your fats, that's okay. If you go under your fats and over your carbs, that's okay too, within reason though. Like if you're you hit your protein goal, you're over your fats and you have to pull your carbs back a bit to stay within your calorie intake, that's cool. If you keep doing it, you're going to find that your energy levels are going to be low because you're not providing enough carbohydrate in your diet or the recommended amount to ensure that you are getting all the benefits from that macronutrient. So there's a reason why I've given you a specific amount of protein, carbs, and fats, and ideally we want to stay as close to those goals as possible. But if you do have days that are a little bit off scale, just consider calories being the number one determining factor of weight gain or weight loss, and then protein being the macronutrient that basically controls lean muscle mass. And then fats and carbs, they can be altered a little bit, and it's not going to be too much of an issue. The second question, it's a very broad question. It says weigh in on the calorie is not just a calorie debate. And what he means is, some people think a calorie is a calorie, so it doesn't matter what it is. We all know that macronutrients matter. What that basically the calorie is not a calorie. That just means that some people will go out and eat 3,000 calories of donuts and be like, it's all good, I'm bulking, but they're not actually considering the protein content of their diet or of that 3,000 calories or the fats or the carbs. So that's why a calorie is not a calorie, because macronutrients are carbs and fats are energy sources, and proteins are lean muscle or an amino acid supply. And they all have a purpose and they all matter. So that's why a calorie is not a calorie. That's why we track macros. We don't just track calories. Calories will dictate weight loss or weight gain, but it doesn't tell you, or it doesn't control whether that weight gain is muscle or fat or water or glycogen or whatever. And same with weight loss. If you're not tracking macros, you're just tracking calories. You're just eating 1,000 calories from donuts rather than 3,000. You will lose weight, but then you're gonna lose muscle as well. And you really have no control of what tissue you lose. Basically, your body will just lose weight as it chooses. So there you go. I hope that answered your question. Second question, let me know if I'm being too OCD here. Obviously, it's best to hit your macros bang on every day. I get as close as I can without weighing out 2 grams of whey protein right before I go to bed to hit my protein for the day. I generally find myself out by a few nearing the end of the week. For example, in comparison to my macro goals, this week without today, my total macro intake is sitting at carbs -3, fats +3, and protein -8. Is it best to catch up on these over the next couple of days to hit weekly total macros, or just keep aiming for your closest day today? Is there a set leeway? And yes, there is. So, having everything on the money, exactly on the dot in terms of grams and stuff, that's just something you don't want to think about. And the reason why it doesn't matter is we try to control as much as we can. So we control your training. You have a training plan, right? You kind of follow the same sequence of exercises for a period of time. You have your sets and rep schemes, and you try to ensure that you're lifting heavier or doing more reps, or you're progressing with that as well. So that's structured and that's controlled. Nutrition, we track your macros, we track your calories, and those numbers are controlled. What you can't control is how active you are on a day-to-day basis outside of the gym. So tomorrow you might walk extra without realizing it. You may have to clean your house for a couple of hours or go out and do something fun. You might go to the beach or something. You're burning more calories. So that's a variable. That's a physical activity or non-exercise activity variable that we can't really control. Now, given that, some days you're going to see improvements in your physique, and other days it's not going to be as good, and that's just based on your non-exercise activity, and that's fine. We're okay with that because we just judge things on a weekly basis. We make adjustments on a weekly basis, and that's perfectly fine. So when it comes to macros, given that you can't be 100% controlled with your daily activity outside of the gym, it's not essential that you're 100% accurate with your macronutrients either. We allow for variations and fluctuations and variables, but we want to limit those or minimize them. So depending on where you are with your contest prep or just your general lifestyle improvements or your fat loss phase or your lean gaining phase or whatever, typically we say stay within 5 grams of your protein target for the day, and stay within 2 grams of your fat target for the day. So by the end of the day, if your protein target's 225 and you have 230, that's fine. If you have 220, that's fine. So you don't have to worry about that too much. I would say from meal to meal, try to track things as accurately as you can. And then as you get towards the day, if you're off by a little bit, it's okay. If you're someone who's trying to lean gain, you're trying to gain muscle, gain weight at a controlled progressive rate, you can be a little bit more flexible. You can push that out to maybe 8 to 10 gram variance with your protein, carbs, and fat. Protein and carbs, and then your fats could be like 3 to 5. If you're someone who's trying to get leaner, or you're very close to a competition or a photo shoot or an event, everything matters a bit more. So that's when you want to be a little bit closer, maybe within 2 grams of your protein and your carbs, and try to get your fat as close as you can. So you definitely don't have to stress about macro consistency and keeping it exactly as it is. Allow yourself a range. If you're in the off season and you're way away from any competitions or events and you kind of have clarity and you know how you're progressing, you can have a wider range of 15 to 20 grams of carbohydrates if you want to, and 5 to 15 grams of fat if you want to. But try to keep your protein fairly close to what I suggest, or within 5 to 10 grams, just because having more doesn't really help you that much, and having less isn't really ideal either. So I hope that answers your question. Moving forwards, an insight into alcohol and body composition or nutrition. So alcohol, basically, it's a macronutrient, or it's an additional macronutrient, I guess you would say. There's 7 calories per meal of alcohol. So when you track MyFitnessPal, alcohol's not listed on the nutritional content or the nutritional panel, so you can't really track it, but it does show. If you were to scan a 4X summer, it would come up with the carbohydrate total, it would come up with fat if it had any, and protein if it had any, and it would also come up with calories as well. You will find that it might say there's 12 grams of calories, or 12 grams of carbs, sorry, but there's 150 calories, and that doesn't work out. And that difference is actually the alcohol that's in it, because alcohol has calories. So to work that into your diet, basically, we know that calories are important, we know that protein's important. If you decide to have alcohol or beer or whatever, scan it in into MyFitnessPal, or try to find the nutritional information if you can, and then focus on the calorie total and pull your carbs back and or your fats, depending on how you feel or what you're eating on that day, or how much room you have to play with. If you've got a high carb intake, you can just pull that back and not really think about it. Pull back fats or carbs, so your protein goal is hit and you're within your calorie restrictions or your calorie goals. Try not to drink too often. Less is better. None is the best, basically. The problem with alcohol is not really the calorie content of it, because we're accounting for that, but it's more so that you have to sacrifice your carbs and your fats. Plus, when you drink, obviously you drink to get drunk for the most part, and that's going to result in you eating foods that you're unaware of or you forget about, and that's going to result in weight gain. So a lot of the time you might be like, oh, I was perfect, I just had a couple of drinks, and you didn't realize that you actually got really drunk. You ended up at Macca's at 4 in the morning, and then you got ice cream, and then you went home and you ate some more. You kind of forget that stuff when you wake up the next day, and that's why alcohol's not a good idea. Maybe, that's not a question. In your programming, when it comes to lifts like lat pull downs, pull ups, bent over rows, etc., how often would you recommend changing your hand grip, if at all? Example, wide, neutral, or reversed. Is it something that should be mixed up every week, set, or 4 week blocks? Good question. So, ideally, you want to keep it the same, keep your grip the same, unless I request it. So with some exercises, I might write down neutral grip pull down, and that means you got your close grip or your V grip. Sometimes I might say reverse grip bent over row. So I'll be quite specific with that. With deadlifts, which is not listed, but with deadlifts, an alternate grip is a good idea because you'll be stronger. The bar will be more balanced. It won't push forwards or lean back into you. So you'll be stronger. Your grip will be better in that regard. When it comes to going wider on lat pull downs, I say just go shoulder width apart. If you feel like you want to go a little bit wider, that's okay, but you don't have to mix things up too much. Just keep it the same. Just with pull-ups, for example, if I'm doing 5 sets of 10 with pull-ups, I might go wide for 2 sets, and then I'll go a little bit closer for 2 sets, and the last set I'll do whatever felt more comfortable, and that's fine too. So there really isn't a big deal when it comes to that. Just try to limit changes just so you can ensure that you are progressing in the right way, and you're hitting the muscle in the same angle and stuff like that. So every 4 week block, you could look at making adjustments to your grip and stuff, or if you're just doing body weight pull-ups or something like that and you want to mix it up, that's fine. When you're really trying to push yourself, hanging weight, lifting heavy bent over rows and stuff, just keep your width, everything the same. And if you're not sure on what to do with those, I've got exercise technique videos, which you guys should watch if you haven't already. And I'll be adding more videos to that as well. All right, can you recommend how to calculate the macros correctly if I want a glass of red or white wine for an occasion? Okay, so again, like alcohol, basically, you want to try to track it. Find that drink or that wine in MyFitnessPal, or find the nutritional information somewhere. If you can't find it, try to find one that you think is quite similar. And again, just scan it in, account for the calories from alcohol, account for the calories from carbs, which will be in there as well, and then just factor that in. If you're going to drink, it's probably best to, like the last time I drank from memory, besides like beers, which are easy to scan, they're just once off at dinners or whatever, if you know you're going to drink, then plan it in ahead of time. Like probably like 6 months ago, I was going to have 4 shots of vodka, and I was going to have 3 shots of Alizé, and I was going to have those with sugar-free Red Bulls with limes. And I had already accounted for that, and I just worked my day around it. Ended up going to a party, and I had all that, and it was great. If I was in a contest prep mode, probably wouldn't be drinking, to be honest. But I did the best I could to work around a situation where I wanted to be social, I wanted to have a good time, but I also wanted to account for things. So do something like that. Should HIIT cardio be done before or after weight training if you're doing HIIT cardio? So HIIT cardio should be done post weight training or on a separate day. HIIT cardio is very similar to weight training in the sense that it uses the same energy systems. It's also quite taxing, and it's intervals, just like weight training. With weight training, you do a set, takes you 15 seconds or so, you rest for a minute or so, you do it again, you rest, and it's kind of like HIIT. So you could do HIIT on a separate day, and that'd be great. Or you can do it right after weight training. The reason why I like it after weight training is because you're completely warmed up and you're just ready to kill it. Whereas if you just go on a rest day, for example, you go on the bike and do sprints, it's going to hurt you a lot more than if you have already done squats and leg curls and sumo deadlifts and stuff like that. Even though you're fatigued from weight training, you're more awake and more alert and alive, and you're more inclined to just push it hard from the start and get it done with. Also, I would never do HIIT before weight training because it's just going to use up all your energy before you do the weights. So it wouldn't make any sense. Our goal with weight training is to be progressive, and if something's going to hinder our progress, it's not a good idea. So if you wouldn't go outside and run a marathon and then do your leg workout either, it's best to keep those things apart. All right, how often should you do PBs, and what's the best way of doing them? warm-ups, reps, etc. Should they be done separate days to training days? Hitting your PBs, with my programming, not always, but with programming, if I want you to know your PB or really push for a certain PB, then I'll program that into your training block. So your third week will most likely be a 6-4-2 block set rep scheme, or it might be a 5-3-1 set rep scheme, meaning that you'll do 5 reps, and you'll do 3 reps, and you'll do your 1 rep max. And that's a good way to warm up and get into it, and also just to see where your 1 rep max is. Typically, if you're trying to push for a 1 rep max, I would suggest, and you're not running a 5-3, well, I would suggest doing it in a 5-3-1 week if you have a program like that. If you want to test your 1 rep max and it's outside of your programming, you just want to do it because you can, or you feel like you want to, then I would suggest coming up with a number you think is close to your 1 rep max, and then warming up at 50% of that weight for 5 reps, and then 70% of that weight for 3 reps, and then 80 to 90% of that weight for 1 to 2 reps. Then I would attempt to do that weight for a single, and if you get it, look at adding more weight, whatever your judgment is. If you got it easy, add 5 to 10 kilos. If it was quite difficult, add 2.5 kilos if you want to, if you really want to know your 1 rep max. Just with 1 rep maxes, make sure that you're in a safe environment, make sure people are around you to help you, or you're doing it in a squat rack or something like that. How often should you do PBs? Really, PBs are just an indicator. Like PBs, when it comes to 1 rep maxes, which I think this question is referring to, they're really just an indicator of current strength. They're not going to make you stronger. If you came into the gym and hit a PB and aimed for your 1 rep max every single week, all you're doing is just testing your 1 rep max. You're not actually training, so there's not enough volume in your workout to actually result in progress or more muscle or more strength or anything like that. There's no adaptations will occur if you just do something for 1 rep. Hitting PBs though, as in reps PBs, like typically you do 140 kilo bench for 9 reps and then you got 10 reps. Push for that as often as you'd like, to be honest. There's nothing wrong with hitting PBs every single training session. However, for every exercise, we're not trying to go to failure. So your bigger exercises, your major lifts, your major movements, your compound movements, if you can push for a personal best on your last set of those exercises, go for it. The smaller exercises like bicep curls and calf raises and tricep press downs and stuff, you can push PBs all the time. But if your programming has squats, back squats, and then you've got front squats, and then you've got leg press or stiff leg deadlifts, something like that, the leg press, stiff leg deadlifts and stuff, don't go to failure with that. Try to focus on PBs on the major lift, and then PBs on smaller muscle groups that can recover quickly. Because training to failure is not something that you want to do all the time. It's something that you need to do on a strategic way, or specific programmed way. And that's why I typically say last set you can go to failure, or only on certain weeks you can go to failure, or your program might tell you what exercises you should train to failure. But yeah, so that answers that question. Okay, the effect of artificial versus natural sweeteners for fat loss. Well, there really is no effect. Basically, artificial and natural sweeteners, I would opt for using stevia as a natural sweetener, just because it's natural, and some people seem to think that it makes a difference to their health. Artificial sweeteners have had a bad rap for many years. I would say an excessive consumption of artificial sweeteners is not a great idea. However, that's relative to what you think is excessive, and how it affects you as a person on an individual basis. So it's not going to affect fat loss in any way. It's not going to change fat loss in any way. However, having excessive amounts of artificial sweeteners can make you feel sick. It can give you a slight headache. It can make you feel dehydrated to an extent. And I'm just talking about having excessive Pepsi Max as an example. Having excessive chewing gum could give you laxative effects, but none of that's going to hinder fat loss. It may make you feel uncomfortable or bloated or things like that on an individual level, but that's not going to change fat loss at all. Just because you're bloated doesn't mean that you're reducing your fat loss or you're slowing things down. So you just have to see for yourself how you feel. I know some people can't have certain things because they just blow out or they feel uncomfortable. Other people like myself can typically just eat whatever I want to in terms of artificial sweeteners. Not that I really do, but I can get away with it, and there's no problem with that. So diet jelly is great. Pepsi Max is fine. Adding Splenda or whatever you like to your long black, that's really no problem at all. Um, Artificial sweeteners, where there was a study done with mice or rats where they had an excessive amount of artificial sweeteners, and it caused brain health damage and things like that. So there was cause for concern, but the dosage was extremely high, and it was something along the lines of 20 liters of Pepsi Max per day for X amount of days in a row, and that's when they saw the effects. And I really don't know anybody in this world that would have that much, nor would you want to have that much. So, and to be honest, if you're having 20 liters of fluid on a daily basis, you're probably going to die from drowning yourself with the water alone. So, even water can kill you. So, just something to think about. But that's pretty much it for the Q&A. Hopefully, I didn't ramble too much, and hopefully answered all your questions as good as I can. Next month we'll do it again. So until then, I'll speak to you guys soon.